We're going to start routing the truss rod slot. There's a few things I want to go over real quick before we actually start doing that, so let's get to it. Now the truss rod should be a traditional two-way truss rod. You can install the truss rod with the Allen key access through the sound hole, or we can turn it around and access it through the peg head. In this build, we've done it through the sound hole. I think that's the simplest way to do it. And the peg head requires a little bit extra care with your peg head design and creating a truss rod cover cap. I just think that's more than what we need to do in this build. This truss rod is a 1/4 inch wide, but if you notice on the welds do stick out just a little bit, and they've got some bumps on there on the front as well as the back. So I am going to use this file and take those off quickly. That's good. All right, so why am I taking these little weld nubs off? Well, because it makes it wider than a 1/4 inch, and when we try to press that down into the truss rod slot, I'm not really gonna be fully confident that we are seating this at the bottom of that truss rod slot if I've got resistance from these little weld nubs on the side. So I am taking those off to get a more consistent, smoother fit. That's all that needed. And that should take care of that one. Now the truss rod is going to fit down into the truss rod slot, just like this, so that this flat part is flush with the top of the neck. We want this steel bar to be resting and pushing up against the fretboard. If we mount it upside down, for one, the truss rod mechanism, this is going to be backwards the way we adjust it. And also we're going to have a very small point of contact between this bar and the fretboard, and it's going to cause some undue stress and possibly cracking and breaking of the fretboard underneath. So we don't want to do that. We're going to flip it this way, and this side is going to be facing up. Now this truss rod is going to be going right down my lamination strip, which for me, I love it. I think that works out great. That's a perfect spot for me. Routing that along here is going to let me know that I've got that in straight and directly in the middle. Let's do this layout again real quick. We need to get about 5 millimeters for the nut. Okay, front of the nut. Now I've got that. Now we need to go 357.7742 millimeters from the front of the nut down to the 14th fret. I am going to call it 358. Don't tell anybody. Now that I've got my 14th fret line here, I'm going to go ahead and mark out where that tenon is going to go as well. Now this is going to be a 7/8 tenon. It's going to go right in front of that 14th fret. Now here's one thing you might want to do. Mark this out. This is all going to go away when we set our neck angle, get that figured out. And this is going to be the tenon. I'm going to make myself a note. Tenon. Tenon. So we go nut to 14th fret. This is where the neck meets the body, and we are going to have a tenon that is shaped somewhat like this. And then this goes away, that's waist, this is waist, and this tenon is going to sit inside the body with some bolts going through it, and that is how we're attaching the neck. This part is just going to be waist, And I'm going to transfer my lines over to the side, not accounting for neck angle quite yet. So I'm just going to do a 90-degree angle for the tenon as well. And you can see that's where I was accounting for those alignment screws just being in the waste product anyway. And even if it was back here where the tenon's going to go, I'm stopping short of this. The tenon's going to stop right around here somewhere, most likely. So that would have still been in the waste. But that's why an alignment pin or alignment dowel or a screw in this area does not concern me much. And this is a perfect spot to do that. Now back to our scale. The truss rod is going to terminate somewhere between the nut and the first fret. So let's get that marked out. Our first fret from the nut is about 36.21 millimeters. 36 and a touch. Not really going to eyeball 0.21 millimeters, I don't think. We're just going to get that close. Okay. There's our first fret. Doesn't mean much right now. We don't have to do anything with that. This is only marking so that visually I know I want to stop somewhere in here. And I want this front part of the truss rod, this flat part here on the bottom of that welded part, to be sitting really right on that tenon. And that is exactly where it lines up. Perfect. That's what I want. Now what I'm going to do is take this spot, the end of the truss rod, and I'm going to carry that line over all the way around to the back. All right, I've carried that line over. Now I know where the truss rod's going to stop, so that when I am pushing this along the router table, that I know this is going to line up on the mark I'm going to lay down right in front of the bit. So we'll get to that. I'm going to lower this down quite a bit because we don't want to attack this truss rod slot all in one swoop. And by the way, the bit I'm using is just a 1/4 inch straight tooth bit. I usually like to use a spiral down cut for this just because it's cleaner and it tends to slot the bottom of the truss rod slot just a little bit smoother. But I can't locate it right now, and this one is a brand new bit, so I think it's going to work just fine. You want to take several passes. Really don't take much more than 1/8 of an inch or so on your truss rod passes. There's just no reason to get after it that aggressively. If you mess it up, we can fill it in and do it again, but why go through the hassle? All right, I have this aligned. I think I've got that pretty well centered. It's always best just to push that up against there and give yourself just a little bit of a test cut before you get too far. And I am actually a little bit off center, so I do want to fix that right now.
With that adjustment made, I'm running another small test. That actually looks really good. It's perfectly down the center, so I'm going to cut a little bit further into the neck and do a width check to make sure that the router bit and the truss rod are perfectly aligned. That looks good. No wobble. I'm happy with that. Let's move on.
Now I've just put down a piece of tape, lined that up with about the center of the bit. Gave myself a mark right here. Now what this is going to do is allow me to know when to stop, so that when I get through, I can line this line up with this tape and I won't blow through the back. That would be not so good. So again, I want to stop about right here where I've marked the end of my truss rod. I don't want to get into the nut with that. I want that nut sitting perfectly on top of the neck and the wood. My test cut I'm really happy with. That's going right down the middle of the lamination. So we'll continue that. And taking a look at this, I need to actually shorten this up a little bit. So I moved my mark about another 5 millimeters, raise this bit. I really want to take 3 to 4 passes to get this truss rod slot routed. Any fewer than that, I think that's just being a little too aggressive. Dust collection. Now the last couple cuts into here, I really want to just creep up onto the height of the truss rod. So we can see, not quite there yet, just about, but it is really close. I don't want to blow past it. I want to get it really dead flat with the top. Now you can go past this maybe by a 1/16 or 3/32 and then put a shim over the top of this. I've done that before, and it's a way to prevent some vibrations or knocking around by a truss rod if you happen to have one. But this particular one has a nice rubber sleeve over the center of this. These are really well made. I've never had a problem with the LMI truss rods. So I'm just going to go straight to the top of this as flush as I can and call it good. It's so close. I mean, that's just like 1/1000th, but I am getting a slight rock there. So one more time, and that is going to take care of it. Luckily, I do have a fairly accurate micro adjust on this, so I can get it really exactly where I want it. Yep, that's exactly where I want it. Now when you feel for this for flush, if you do any sort of test with your square, anything like that, make sure that you test for that level right here where there's bottom support on it. Don't do it in the middle, because that middle is going to flex because there's not all that support. So do it on this end or this end where we know we've got good support. We're level there. Nice and even there. I'm going to call that good. And that takes care of our truss rod slot.